What's up, Camp Broadside? Troy Mosby here. How y'all doing? Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. We have a great episode ahead of us. We have my good friend, Mr. Tyler Sparks, joining us tonight. But before we dive off into Tyler's stories, if you haven't liked and subscribed to our channel, I'd ask you to do that, please. And if you dig our stories here at Camp Broadside, if you wouldn't mind sharing them with your friends, well, we'd greatly appreciate it. But without further ado, please help me give a big old Camp Broadside welcome to Mr. Tyler Sparks.
Man, I gotta grab my bow. Ah! This is what I live for, this is what I die for, and this is what I eat and breathe. Yeah, looking real close, you couldn't even see a tree standing in my family tree.
I'm telling you, that shit was the craziest thing I ever seen.
Tyler Sparks, what's happening, my man?
What's going on, brother?
Just enjoying another beautiful day here in Kansas City, Missouri. How are you doing?
More of the same, man. It's first day back to work after a 9-day vacation with my family, so ground's a little rough, but all in all, the weather's still great. I got to come home, spend some time outside, did some door knocking for some properties for this season, so it was a good day.
Nice. How was that vacation, man?
It's good. Went to Hilton Head for 4.5 days, and then went and saw my in-laws in Greenville for 4.5 days. And man, I something about the ocean for me just helps me reset. I came back just full of energy and excitement, and just ready for
Yeah.
life.
Hey, sometimes we need that shut off. I've been talking to one of my kids about that. I said, sometimes, man, you gotta shut everything off and get your mind back, straight. You know what I mean? He got so much going on. I'm like, sometimes you just need that peace for a little bit, and it helps tremendously. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for
Hey, you
sure.
care if I tell you a joke, man?
Not at all. Not at all. Let's hear it.
All right. So I asked my wife the other day, I said, man, am I the only one you've ever dated? And she says, yeah, you are. The rest of them have all been nines and tens. Ah,
Uh,
man, I tell some people these jokes because I got to think of them, and I tell some of these people, my buddies, these jokes, and they're like, do not say that joke. And I'm like, the more they say that, the more I want to say it because I'm like, that's dumb. I got to say that. I told him, I said, man, I get nervous, you know what I'm saying, when these start up or whatever. So I'm always like kind of a little uptight maybe. And I feel like if I say something stupid, it helps me relax, you know what I mean? Because I get that out of the way and we can just go on, you know what I'm saying?
oh, for sure. For sure.
Hey, so those of you that don't know Tyler Sparks, I met him in the Saddle Hunter Nation group. He commented on a post I had made about 2024 bucks. And he posted a picture of a super nice buck, man. Beautiful. So I wanted to put that up there so you can see that sucker right there, man. Was you excited when you walked up on that one, boy?
Yeah, man, I was over the moon. Absolutely over the moon. It's the first antlered buck that I've ever shot at 30 years old. So I don't think there's anything outside of the birth of my kids and marrying my wife that has got me that excited in a long time.
Ooh, I know that feeling, brother. That's a wonderful feeling, isn't it?
For sure.
So before we jump off into this story, Tyler, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, kind of how you got into hunting? I know you're involved in the Mobile Hunter Expo a little bit. If you want to talk about that, man, and let's just get to know Tyler Sparks. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I'm from Ohio, born and raised here. Didn't really know as a child that it was one of the best whitetail states in the nation until I became an adult. Kind of knew about hunting, but grew up in a primarily fishing family. Didn't really do much in the woods outside of hiking and stuff in the summer, just because I was a wrestler for 12 years, and I started when I was 8 with that, and took it all the way through my freshman year of college. And if you don't know, wrestling season starts up usually about the end of September. Ohio's deer season starts up at the end of September, and they both run all the way through till February. And wrestling season sometimes can go even a little bit longer depending on what level you're at. And so for me, when it came to hunting, I just never had the flexibility and schedule to get into it. It was something that I basically lived vicariously through videos on TV, the outdoor channel, playing video games that were hunting related, and then obviously walking through Bass Pros and Cabela's and seeing taxidermy on the wall that just made me wonder. And I got out on my own a little bit as an adult and started working as a machinist. And some of the guys that I worked with, they were huge bow hunters. They've been doing it for years. And I just remember finally one day after hearing story after story, after hearing and seeing pictures and the excitement that they shared over it, I kind of hit the point where I was like, you know what, I kind of want to learn this. I had an uncle at the time who he had been really into it. He'd gotten out of it. He was kind of starting to get back into it again. And, I started asking him some questions. And one of the guys I worked with, his name's Cody. And he, at the time, was shooting tournament archery as well. And anything from indoor spot targets to outdoor 3D courses, traveling all across the country to do that. And I remember just one day walking up to him and handing him one of those like 5x7 yellow notepads, and I gave it to him and I said, Cody, man, I want to get into bow hunting. I don't need any of your spots. I don't want, I really don't even want you to take me because I want to learn. But can you just, maybe make me a list of what it is that I need, the bare necessities to get out in the woods and start deer hunting this fall. And he wrote me out that list. I spent the next couple months, buying a stand, buying some camo. I had gotten a compound bow, and right when I got the compound bow, that was when Cody kind of approached me. He said, hey, man, he goes, I know you're excited. I know you're wanting to get out there and do this. He said, but shooting a compound bow is not as easy as what, you would think it is. He goes, there's a lot of different intricacies to shooting that can make or break your shot, essentially. And he said, he kind of told me, he said, I will take the time to teach you how to shoot a bow if you can promise me that you'll wait at least one full year of shooting consistently with me before you go take a bow out for a deer. And he said, if you've got a crossbow, use it. By all means, don't hinder yourself and take a season away from yourself for this. But if bow hunting is something you really want to do, take the time to actually get good with the bow, so that way you can be ethical and efficient, and you're not, wounding animals or missing targets or any of that kind of stuff. So I went down that road. Sense. Yeah, I went down that road. I shot tournament 3D for about 3 years. Ended up falling in love with it. Had an absolute blast doing it. Went to Alabama and Georgia a couple different times. Went down to Kentucky a couple times, and really got into it and loved it, and got good enough with a bow that I had no issue. Still to this day, I have no issue being confident when a deer's in front of me. I'm shooting. And so I started hunting that fall as well. I did take my first deer with a crossbow. And after that, man, I hit the ground running bow hunting for deer, and I was ate up with it. I loved every bit of it. I was the gullible, naive, new guy in the beginning, and I watched every video on YouTube and, had no understanding or knowledge of public land versus private land, or even, private lease versus, just private permission and all these different things. And so I kind of joke about it because at the time I didn't have any permission hunting property for the first 3 years. And so I hunted all public. And I tell everybody I was the best private lease manager hunting public land that you'd ever met, because every video I watched was how to manage a herd on a big, private lease of hundreds of acres and all these things you can control and variables you've got your hands on. And I'm running around on public that's pressured by 50 guys on any given day, trying to figure out where the deer are hiding at, and, it took me a while to kind of get through that. But I still to this day, like I said, outside of my family, there's not much more that gets me more excited or fired up that, outside of hunting, and not just deer. I get excited over shooting squirrels in the beginning of September.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way, man. I love to go out squirrel hunting. I don't do it as often as I'd like to, but when I do get a chance to get out and I get out there, man, I have a blast doing it, So, how long have you actually been bow hunting?
If my memory serves me correct, this past year was my 8th season in the woods chasing deer. So about 8 years.
8th season. Yeah. And you shot doe before this buck and stuff, I'm sure. I'm assuming you shot a few does. And
I think
this was your first antlered.
Yeah. So before the buck, I think I had 4 does under my belt. There's 3 does and 1 spike. And he was barely a spike, but under my belt nonetheless.
Yeah.
Support him.
It was meat in the freezer for sure. Hey, that's what counts at the end of the day, right? That's why I tell
Oh,
people my wife, she does daycare. And one thing I've always been proud of is that all these kids that have come through this house in all these years, you know what I'm saying? They've all been grew up on deer meat and they all absolutely love it. You know what I'm saying? You can give them a little bit of beef and they'll be like, "What is this?"
mm-hmm.
But they love deer meat, you know what I mean? So I stock the heck out of that freezer if I can. I love to shoot does, you know what I mean? You get some people that they don't really shoot does that often and whatnot, and I'm like, I shoot if it's a good nanny doe, boy, I'm taking her, I promise, you know what I mean? And I'm filling that freezer up. And if I can get a nice buck along the way, I'll definitely be that's icing on the cake. But we gotta get meat in the freezer because them kids ain't cheap. You know what I'm saying? It's funny, man. I'll just tell you a little bit about that. I come home with a deer. It's like sometimes I take my deer to the processor. I got a good processor that I take it to, and they do a great job. So I always take it there. But sometimes I'm like, I got to swing by the house so that these kids, they want to see this. They want their picture with it. You know what I mean? They touch it. I've had a couple of them kiss it, where I'm like, hey, bro, I don't know if you should kiss that. But they want to do all this. And I'm always like, man, I don't know what their parents think of this. You know what I'm saying? But they all deal with it, and I've gotten to where a couple of them along the way, I've actually took out like turkey hunting, where we go sit in a blind and legit go hunting and stuff, and they love it. So I always think, man, I hope I'm starting something because a lot of the kids, nobody in their family actually hunts. So if I can kind of be that little influence on them to get them started into it, man, I'll do it. You know what I'm saying, for sure. But I do always wonder what they think about when they see pictures of these kids. They'll be holding squirrels. They be doing all kinds of stuff, They don't- but it's. I'm like, this is way more than just a daycare. We treat them like they're our own. You know what I'm saying? That's a fact right there. But all right, Tyler. So let's. You want to walk us through this day when you or tell us about this buck? Did you have some history with him? Uh, did you have pictures of him? Had you seen him before? Um, tell us how this
Yeah,
all went down, man.
yeah. So I last year I actually had a couple bucks, somewhat closer to home, at least much closer than this deer was. This deer was about 2 hours 15 minutes away, and I had a couple bucks somewhere around that hour mark away from home that I've been watching all summer long. One was going to be a beautiful 10. I mean, the most perfect typical 10 I'd ever seen in my life. My life, it's been 8 seasons of hunting, but he was gorgeous and he was amazing. And I watched him all summer long. And somewhere around Labor Day, he got hit with a little bit of pressure and he disappeared on me. And then I had another one who was a great 8, real tall, but real tight basket type of 8. But still probably every bit of 120, 130 inches. Just, again, another gorgeous deer. And they were bachelored up together all summer. And once that pressure hit, they both disappeared. And the beginning of the season, it kind of sucked because I did one kind of Hail Mary shot at that Big Ten where I thought he was bedded at, and thinking maybe he was just rerouting to get to that bed and avoiding the camera I had. So I went in there. I hunted for literally the first entire half of the day. It was about a 6-hour sit, and I didn't see a lick of anything. And that afternoon, it started pouring down rain, so I got out of there. And fast forward the following weekend, I took my oldest son hunting for the first time for deer. Shot a doe with him, and kind of got the monkey off my back to start the season, and breathe a little bit. And the couple weeks later, I had a deer camp invite from Austin Cantola, who's the owner of Genesis 3D Printing Products, and went out
Austin's
to
a great
Southeast
dude, isn't he?
Ohio. Oh my gosh, he's salt of the
Yeah.
earth, man.
Yeah, dude. He's
Couldn't
I don't
speak
know
higher
him real
of him.
well. I've chatted with him a few times, like online, and whatnot through Facebook Messenger or whatever. We chatted back and forth a few times about different things, and I'm always just like, that dude. He's a great dude, man, and he's doing cool things, man.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And he he had hit me with an invite to a camp, and I believe, if I remember right, they were doing 5 days. And at the time, I kind of told him, I said, look, I don't think I can commit to all 5 days, but I know I could commit to at least 2. And he said, dude, that's fine. He said, come and go as you want. If you can only do 2 days, come for 2 days. This is just kind of like his way to have some fellowship with some guys, around hunting. He was planning on doing the camp in Ohio, and he invited a handful of guys, and I was the only one actually from Ohio who was able to make it. And so everybody else coming in was from like Michigan, Wisconsin, everywhere coming to Ohio. And then it was kind of comical because I had like a 2-hour drive out there, and everybody else was traveling, 4 or 5 hours. But
right.
we met up out there, and I'd been e-scouting all week, the kind of around the area where we were going to be staying at. And the frustrating thing for me was like all the topography just kind of looked the same to me. And so I kind of got frustrated a little bit. I said, you know what, I'm going to find something within the topography that just looks different from everything else, and find something that stands out to me that's away from like the normal pattern that I was seeing. And I ended up finding this little knob. There was a south-facing point, and it came down, it made a little saddle, and then it came up to a little knob. And then that knob dumped off real gradually down to some private, what I thought at the time was ag field, and ended up finding out when I got down there that it was just overgrown natives at that point. And I looked at the weather for the week, and the very first day that I had to hunt down there, I had a north wind. And I was like, man, if I can get in there on that north wind with it pushing down the face of that slope and the thermals coming up, I said, I bet you deer are going to sweep around the front of that trying to scent check everything on that top. And I was like, you know what? And I said, I'm going to formulate that game plan. Every other day after that, I had 3 or 4 other spots set up for the other winds that we were getting. But I was like, that is the only day and the only time that wind is going to work for that spot. And so we get down there the night before the first day, and Austin's down there and another guy named Terry, and they were planning on. They're like, we're waking up tomorrow. We're going to go scout. We're going to sleep in a little bit, the whole 9. And they're like, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm waking up at 4 a.m. I'm hunting. And I did that. I woke up. I went out to the pull-off. There wasn't a soul in sight that morning. I didn't pass anybody on the roads. I didn't see anybody hunting, like nothing. And I went completely blind into this area. I was kicking myself on the way in because I jumped 3 deer. And I was just like I would maybe go 50 yards and I'd bump a deer and I'd hear it. The leaves in those hills are so stinking loud. You couldn't be quiet if you wanted to. And I bumped them deer, and I was like, man, I should probably set up right here. Like there's obviously deer bedding right here. This is probably where I should be. And I've got a bad habit that I'm breaking of second guessing myself on a game plan. And so I talked myself out of it. I said, you know what? No, we're sticking to the game plan. This is what we're going to do. If nothing happens by 10 o'clock, we'll get down. We'll scout for the evening. And I got down in there, got up in a tree, and as I'm setting up, I had one of those big old nanny does starts coming in, and it's still probably about an hour before first light, and I can hear her walking in, and I just froze in the tree because I'm like, crap, I got to stop moving around up here. I got a green headlamp on, and I'm doing this around the tree setting up, and I'm like, I got to be still. She and I ended up having a standoff for probably about 10 minutes where I ended up getting my light kind of over towards where she was because I wanted to know if it was a buck or a doe. And I got my light over enough to see that it was a big doe. And she kept walking. She looped behind me. She ended up catching my wind. And she stood there for a while looking kind of my direction. And I was looking down at her. And we just had a standoff for 10 minutes. And she finally decided to blow and took off. I was like, you stupid deer, And so she leaves, the worst. And I was so mad. But she left, and I got set up. And from the time she came through till about 8:30, nothing had shown up. I mean, there wasn't a sound, no deer, no nothing. The wind had died off so bad that you couldn't even feel it. And I was kind of like, man, I'm getting a little frustrated. And I actually was planning on getting down early to start scouting early and get a jump for the evening hunt. And I was looking at my phone, e-scouting, trying to figure out which way I wanted to go. And I heard a bunch of branches break, and I was like, that is way too loud. Like there's either a person back here or there's a deer. And I looked up, and the way I thought that I heard it coming from was off to my right. So I look up to my right, and I stared that direction for a couple minutes trying to figure out where it's at. And then I started scanning to my left, and that's when I saw him. And he was out probably about 60 yards. So I grab my bow, I unhook it, I pick my rangefinder up, find him, and I'm kind of watching him walk. And I clicked my rangefinder, and he was at about 35. And the route he was going on, I was like, he's going to hit 40 on the strong side of my tree. And I was like, it's gonna be a heck of a shot because that's what I'm sighted in for is 40. I was like, it's gonna be tough, but I think I was confident I could do it. And sure enough, he stops about 15 yards from that shooting lane, and he turns and starts j-hooking into a scrape that I was over. And again, I went in blind. I had no idea the scrape was there. I was 6 yards off of it, not a clue. Sun came up. I looked down and went, oh, cool.
Yeah.
But that deer,
that's always a good surprise, though, isn't it?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it's much better than getting out there and seeing nothing. Like,
100%. I always like when that sun comes up and all of a sudden you're like, wow, there's a nice scrape right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. And he made that j-hook in, and I ended up having to go from strong side over across my bridge to weak side. And there was one tree that he stopped behind, and I was trying to spin my hips to where I could get my shoulders opened up to draw, because I basically was holding my bow like this right in front of me, and I'm trying to turn and I can't get turned. And just about the time I was getting ready to start drawing, he pops back out from behind that tree, and he was coming uphill, staring basically right in my direction. And I'm like, I cannot move. Like, I've had a couple deer bust me coming up hills like that, and I've tried to move, and they're staring your direction. They'll pick the movement off like that, And I literally watched him work his way all the way into that scrape. He started hitting the licking branch and everything, and he's messing around and all that, and he brought his head down, and he looked away from me, and I was like, oh, man, perfect opportunity. So I went to shift my hips. Well, right as I shifted my hips, he turned his head back, and he saw me, and he starts to bound off, and I immediately started drawing my bow back to get on him and follow him. And right about the time he hit, I think he was right at 15 yards, and I took a big breath in and went to hit him with the, the textbook, and right as my lips touched to say it, he stopped. And I was like, I like froze, and he kind of turns and looks back over his shoulder, and I put the pin right where I needed it to be, and I squeezed that trigger and buried it. I came in about halfway back on the near side, and it buried in the offside shoulder. And when I ended up dressing him out, I had severed diaphragm in both lungs going to the other side and went right over top of the heart, just barely missed it. And he ran, I think it was somewhere between 70 and 80 yards, and there was an old barbed wire fence that was running through the property there where, at some point in time, the private landowner had sold land back to the state. So just an old, nasty, worn out, rundown fence was right there. Well, I don't know if he just didn't see it or if that's exactly where he died, but he barreled his head right into that fence and did a flip end over. And I heard the crash. I lost my mind. Just like, it took me an hour to calm down in the tree before I could feel comfortable enough to try and get down, because I was just, I was over the moon. I was shaking, freaking out. I shot that deer in woods that my uncle used to run when he was my age, which meant the world. He passed away. If I remember right, it was in 2022 he passed away unexpectedly, and he was my number 2 hunting buddy next to my dad. I sent him every deer picture, showed him every buck on camera, the whole nine. And to be able to go down into the same kind of woods that he always talked to me about, he badgered me for 4 years. You got to go down to here. You got to go down to here. You got to go down to here. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it one day. I'll do it one day. And then finally, when Austin reached out to me, he was like, hey, this is where we're going. I'm like, I can't not go. I have to do it. Like, there's a reason. Yeah. There's a reason of all the people he knows and connections he has that he reached out to me. And man, I was 100% right. There was a huge reason, and it meant the world. It was awesome.
So that's what you were saying. So your uncle used to hunt those same woods right there?
Yeah. He grew up, when he got out on his own, he got really big into bow hunting, and he did it more out of necessity for food. You know, he didn't have a ton of money when he was younger. You know, he literally hunted to pack the freezer because it was, you know, if he didn't, it was going to be hard for him to eat that year. And he went down there a lot with, you know, one buddy of his, and they would always go down and they'd split up for, you know, 3-4 days and they wouldn't see each other. And then that 5th day, they'd meet up at, you know, a crossroad and head back, you know, up to, you know, where they both were from. And he ran those hills like crazy. And when he found out I was getting into hunting, he was like, man, you got to go down here. You got to go down here. And I used to tell him, I was like, well, you come show me. And he's like, I'm too old. He's like, I got arthritis in my neck. I can't be in the cold, you know, and the whole nine. And I was like, man, like, you know, and so I think part of the reason it took me so long to do it was just the, not having the confidence to know what I was doing or be able to be, you know, somewhere I'd never been before and have the confidence to navigate around and everything. But once I had that and I got the opportunity, I was down there in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say, being in his old stomping grounds. And, I know we had talked about the whole, you think that when you put that buck down, that kind of gave you that closure you were looking for. You know what I mean? So, you know, he was with you and, he'd be super proud of that buck right there. Look at that shot. Yeah, that's you put it on it, man, and congratulations on that there for sure. And I'm glad you kind of got some peace, like with the passing of your uncle and stuff through all this. Um, it's amazing what bow hunting does to you. You know, just to your mind, spirituality, everything. You know, it's. I think a lot of people don't realize that it's a whole lot more than just going out and shooting deer. You know what I mean? It's there's a lot more to it than that for sure.
Oh yeah.
So
Hands down.
you had mentioned before that you do some stuff with Mobile Hunter Expo. What do you do with that?
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember exactly how many years ago it was. It might have been 4 now. But I had met Chris through one of the pages on Facebook. And started kind of chatting back and forth with him just a little bit, you know, similar to how you and I kind of met. And he kind of got a whim out of nowhere to put on a mobile hunting expo, and he put it together in 3 weeks' time and said, "Hey, here's where it's going to be." Pulled together a bunch of small companies at the time, and basically told some of the people that were coming that, "Hey, if you've got equipment or gear that you know we don't have a company represented here, bring it, and you know so people can try it and check it out." And so at the time, I had a Latitude Method saddle. They weren't going to be at the event, so I asked him, "Hey, is it okay if I bring it and throw it on one of the demo poles?" He said sure. I had a Wild Edge battlement platform. I think I might have had one other thing, but he was like, "Yeah," he goes, "Bring it, throw it on a pole, have it on display or whatever, so people can check it out." And so I initially went with the sole purpose was I was going to throw that on there just for people to see, just kind of like the community of it, and hang out and talk shop with some guys and share stories and stuff. And I wanted to check out some of the gear other guys were running that I had interest in at the time. And funny enough, I got down there and I spent about the first 45 minutes or so meeting Chris, meeting Josh Luck, meeting a couple of the other guys like Aaron Satterfield and all them that I had been chatting with for a while on Facebook. And I saw a couple things I wanted to see. And next thing you know, I'm standing there beside the pole teaching everybody about the Latitude Method saddle and the battlement platform. And here's how you wear it. Here's how you run it. Here's the possibilities of what you can do with it, And next thing I know, I looked down at my phone and I'd been there for 6 hours working. It just flew by. And I looked at Chris. I said, "Dude, I got to get out of here." I said, "My wife's at home. She's pregnant. I was supposed to be home an hour ago." I shot her a text and I told her, I was like, "Hey, I'm kind of busy, blah, blah, blah." And I was in the doghouse when I got home for that. And she knew it was, she saw right then it was something I was hugely passionate about. And Chris caught me on my way out and he said, "Hey," he goes, "in a couple of days, give me a call." He goes, I want to talk to you about something." And I was like, "Okay, man," I didn't think much of it. I was like, all right, whatever. A couple days go by. I give Chris a call, and Chris kind of told me, he said, "Hey," he goes, he's like, I think it'd be really cool to have you be kind of part of our team and our little core group of guys, you know, if you're interested, because you did really well at the expo with some of the equipment and whatnot. And I kind of told him, I said, give me some time to think about it. Let me see kind of what I got the bandwidth to do. And ultimately my wife was like, you know, you love it. You know, you love doing it. You know, you love being involved with it and talking to people and teaching people what you know. And she was like, I think you should go for it. And so, you know, I told Chris, I said, yeah, I said, whatever you need, you know, let's try and see what we can do. And from then on, it's been, you know, any chance I get time to promote the expo, I do it. I think there's been 1 year where I missed expos, and it was because I had a newborn at home, and we already had one under 3, and then we had another one, and I was like, I can't leave my wife for 4 days to go to, you know, another state and run all across all summer long while she's trying to manage this, because he had just been born at the beginning of the summer. And so I did miss that year, but every other expo since then I've been working, been doing everything I can to try and find, you know, small little companies that you know, have a true good quality product or idea or something that they want to bring to market, and they understand the camaraderie behind it. Chris is really big on the, you know, let's all be at the same table and eat together, you know, kind of mentality, and that's what the expo has always been about. You know, it's never been an ego thing. You know, when you walk into there, you can talk to anybody and everybody. I met some of my favorite, you know, hunting heroes at the time through the expo, and you know, I was that, you know, starry-eyed, you know, kid meeting, you know, guys like Jacob Emery and Jake Bush for the first time, because, you know, there were these big buck killers on YouTube that I, you know, basically TV stars to me at the time. Now they're, you know, Jacob Emery's a buddy of mine. I text him probably once a week, twice a week, and, you know, we give each other crap and we tease each other, we joke around, like, you know, and it's weird to go from that, but that's what that environment does. It really shows you that everybody's just human. We're all just guys trying to shoot deer, you know, girls trying to shoot deer, and we love the woods. We want to protect the resource. We want to do what we can to teach and encourage and lift up everybody else that we can, to just be better hunters and experience more.
Yeah. I went to last year, I went down to Dalton and went to the Mobile Hunter Expo. That was my first one. I'd been to several other shows, obviously, but that was my first Mobile Expo show I was at. And man, I was thoroughly impressed with how it was put on, you know, and I met Chris and Josh and all them at the same time, you know. And then, of course, all the other vendors that you meet, your owners and stuff. And kind of like you know, you see these people on social media and whatnot, and you're like, some of them you get kind of starry eyed at. You're like, oh yeah, I know him. You know what I mean? Or I don't know him, but I know who he is, and so you want to go up and meet him and whatnot. I've met a lot of good people, and I've developed some really good relationships out of it. As you know, I own Broadside Camo now. Me and my son, one of my oldest sons, we own the company now. So we got a few weeks till our very first expo up there in Ohio. So we're super stoked for that, man. It's kind of getting, the pressure's on now. It's like, oh man, we getting close. It's like, are we ready? I don't know. Are we ready? You know, we got a lot of. We thought we was ready, but now we're like, oh, we got other stuff we got to get done, and so we're really excited about it. And I'm really glad Chris puts it on. You know, I keep telling him, you know, he calls that the Midwest show, and they're in Ohio, and I'm like, Midwest show would be right here in Kansas City, Missouri, man. We're the heart of America. You know what I'm saying? So maybe one day we'll get one out here and be close to home for me. You know, so. But I know you and I had talked one time, and I was really interested in what you had to say about that. You was talking about Chris talking to you about thermals, and you guys went out and he was showing you different stuff. You want to tell us a little bit about that, man?
Yeah. So kind of like I mentioned before, when I first got into hunting, a lot of the information and material that I got was it's the mass marketed stuff, right? Like, you need every scent killer on the planet. This is the newest, next, greatest, best thing. All this stuff. And so when I first became friends with Chris, you know, I used to ask him questions, and I'd be like, "Hey, I just picked up this new scent killer. What do you think of it?" And you know, I got a little bit of razzing from it, because he's like, "Dude, I throw my clothes in the laundry with every other piece of clothing I've got. I wash it with Tide. I put it in my drawer. you know, when I go hunting, I pull it out. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, because again, everybody that taught me up to that point was like, kill your scent, kill your scent, kill your scent. You know, put your clothes in totes and get butt naked at the pull off to get dressed because you don't want to lick anything on them, you know. And I just, man, I was so confused by it. And so I started like picking his brain a little bit. And my uncle, he used to tell me about thermals a lot. He was a small aircraft pilot, absolute whiz when it came to aerospace engineering. And he would talk to me all the time about how wind moves and how air moves and what thermals are. And I don't know if it was because he was so educated in it from a technical standpoint and terminology standpoint, it just never clicked in my brain. I couldn't understand what he was talking about. He would draw me pictures, and it just never, I don't know what it was. It just never was there for me. And then I get into hunting, and again, I get around the mobile group and some of these guys that are hunting and killing big deer and doing it consistently, and they're like, oh man, the thermals, the thermals, the thermals. And I'm like, what in the heck are you guys talking about? You know, and again, guys would show me pictures and they draw diagrams, and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And so finally one summer, I don't know if it was out of the generosity of Chris's heart or the frustration of dealing with me. He just finally called me up and he said, dude, I'm going scouting this weekend. If you can be at my house the night before, you can come with me. He said, you can't tell anybody about the spot. You can't tell anybody where we're going. He said, I'm not dropping you pins. I'm not doing anything. And he goes, if I catch you dropping a pin on your phone, he's like, I'll take your phone, I'll break it. And I'm like, got it. Yes, sir. You know, yes, Sergeant, whatever. Let's do it, you know. And he said, you're essentially what it was I was like, dude, I just want to come and learn. Let me come and be a broken record and ask questions and you talk out loud so I can figure out what your brain's thinking, right? And we I did. I drove down there that night, stayed the night. We woke up the next morning, bright and early. We went out. We used some water access into an area, and he, you know, from the get go, he was like, "Look, here's this. This is what I'm looking at. This is what we're looking for." That kind of stuff. And we were actually following a minor trail on this hillside. We were probably in the bottom third of the hill, and I caught some movement out of the left side of my eye, and so I turn and I look, and Chris is probably 5 yards in front of me, and I see 3 does starting to kind of cook through the woods back up the hill the other direction. And so I kind of, you know, whisper shouted for him and pointed up the hill, and he turned and looked, saw him, and, you know, he was like, oh, cool. So he, you know, motions me. I come up to him, and he told me, he says, okay, he goes, here's going to be one of your first big lessons. He goes, we're going to go figure out where those deer were bedded at. And I was like, you know, and at the time, I'm like, all right, you know, how are we going to do that? Because you know, at the time, I was like, I'd heard people talk about, you know, beds for deer, but I'd never seen one. I had no idea what it looked like. I didn't know how you find them, nothing. And so we start working our way up this hill, and I'm watching Chris kind of look and pick this hill apart. And he looks over and he goes, boom, he goes, right there. And sure enough, there were 2 beds right beside each other where the leaves that had fallen from the fall before were all matted and divoted down and everything. And we went up to it, and he bent down and he said, look, he goes, there's hair in here. And he goes, that's, you know, one of the ways you know it's fresh. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's awesome, you know. And I was like, that's what a deer bed looks like. I had no clue, you know. And we're looking at it, and he goes, okay, he goes, I'm going to teach you why those deer were laying here. And I said, okay. And he said, go ahead and get down on your knees and your elbows, almost like you're a deer, you know, laying down. And so I get in the bed and I do that. And he said, okay, he goes, now look down the hill, kind of the direction we were coming from. So I did. And he said, can you see the trail we were on? And I said, yes. And he said, okay. He goes, that's exactly why those deer got up and booked it before we got to them. He said, they saw us coming. And he goes, now, he said, look a little further down. He goes, can you see over the crest where that bench drops off? And I said, no. And he said, exactly. So if you were to sneak up on a deer that's right here, you would use that to your advantage because they can't see you below that. They'd have no idea you were there. I was like, okay, cool. You know, got it. He was okay. He goes, now he's like, I'm going to show you thermals. And I was like, okay. He said, you see this sunny spot up here? And I said, yeah. He said, okay. He's like, I want you to stay in that bed. He goes, I'm going to go right up here. And he goes up to where that sun spot is, and it basically is just a wide open area in the canopy where all that sunlight was hitting the bottom of the woods. And he pulls milkweed out of his harness, and he lets go of it. And that milkweed immediately, like, he let go of it, and it kind of fell, and then it immediately swooped back uphill. And I was kind of looking at that, and I was like, well, that was interesting, you know. And he goes, okay. And he goes, now watch this. and he steps back into the shade where the canopy was covering the woods or the floor, and none of the sun was getting in. And he pulls milkweed out and he lets go of it, and I watched that milkweed fall from where he was about 15 yards away from me, right down the hill, right in front of where I was laying in that doe's bed, and it kept going downhill. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I'm looking at him, and he goes, "Where those deer are laying," he said, "the milkweed," or he said the thermals, because it's cooler air, are falling down the hill. And he said, so anything that tries to come at them from above them, they're going to smell it before they can get to it. And he said, now, because of where they're looking downhill, anything predatorial coming uphill, they're going to see it 60, 70 yards away. And he goes, they're almost bulletproof with where they're laying at. And like, I don't know, it's one of those times where like I almost felt my brain fire the synapse and make the new connection physically, because it just completely opened up every aspect of my approach to hunting, and looking at maps and e-scouting. And when I, like before, I would look at a map and I'd be like, I don't know, it looks like a great spot, right? And now I look at a map and I turn topography on and I'm like, oh my gosh, look what I found. And then, now with LiDAR scanning, it's even better. But the when he showed me that, it completely opened my eyes. And the following year, or the following month, I was back up closer to home, and I pulled up the topography of a public WMA, and I was looking at it, and I said, oh man, I said, here's some hills over here. I said, the way these hills lay out is almost exactly like where we were scouting at when I went with Chris. I said, I bet you if I go out there, I'm going to bump some deer that are going to be bedded around here. And sure enough, I went out there and I was walking in, and I ended up bumping a really nice buck in the middle of July off this hill. And the very first thing I did was I ran right to where I saw him stand up at. I found his bed, and the way he was laying, he had positioned his bed right on the edge of one of those sunspots, to where he was laying kind of under a canopy from a big honeysuckle. And I stood right at that line, and I'm not kidding you, I took milkweed out in my left hand, and I held it out in the sunspot, and I let go of it, and it went right up to where that bed was. And I took milkweed out with my right hand and held it under the canopy, and I let go of it, and it went right down to where that bed was. And I'm standing there looking like, this is exactly what he talked about. I'm like, this is the exact setup. And I was talking with him, and he said 9 times out of 10, if you can find this setup, he's like, there's probably a scrape of some sort nearby. And I walked 25 yards to this little secondary ridge, and sure enough, there was a community scrape there the size of a freaking car hood. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And like, immediately threw a camera up on it. I had 2 or 3 really nice bucks that year that I was chasing after. Almost got one of them. He came in dogging a hot doe and wouldn't pull off of her for nothing. And I just, like, it completely changed every aspect. And what was crazy to me is that first 5-year span of hunting before I had that trip with Chris scouting, the first 5 years, I would probably hunt 30, 40 times, and I would maybe see 5 deer the whole season. I mean, it was rough. And then after that, what was crazy is that in the last 3 years, I've seen more deer in 10 sits a season than I had the previous 5 years of hunting combined. And it's like getting on deer has, in the general sense now, is almost easy to me. To where, like, I can look at a map, I can see kind of what's around, and I can be like, there's probably going to be deer here. How many of them, I don't know. Are they going to be mature? I usually can probably guess based on, how accessible it is and whether or not I think it's overlooked. But for the most part, I can look and be like, there's probably going to be deer right here based off what I'm looking at and knowing how thermals are. What's the first thing
you look at?
For me, it's usually topography. I'll look at topography first, and I will try and find an area where hills are coming together and ridge points are kind of coming together. And then I'll kind of backtrack off of a main ridge, and I'll find little secondary ridges. And I'll usually scout those first before I get out to the main one. And almost every time I find the majority of my sign on those secondary ridges where deer might be traveling along the main ridge, and then they drop off. And then, another one might travel a little bit further and drop off the other side. That's 9 times out of 10 what I look for. And then once I find the topography I'm looking for, I usually look to see is there public or private ag or native fields nearby? And if there are, how far away are they? And that's going to kind of tell me, is it preferred? Is it not preferred? Is it a further travel route? Am I going to probably find sign closer to that versus further away? And it gives me kind of a little bit better idea of, hey, how's the wind going to move based on the topography in relation to where that ag is? Because if the ag field's at the bottom of a big drainage, then I know those deer are probably going to be up top towards the back of the drainage in the mornings and during the day, and then as the evening comes, when those thermals switch, they're going to dump off and they're going to go down to where they've got the thermals in their face and they can smell anything that they need to coming in front of them. So there's so many different dynamics of it, but it kind of got me out of the I was one of those guys that, like, if I couldn't find an ag field, I didn't hunt. Right, I had to find an agriculture field for a food source, and that's what I did my hunting off of. And now, if I can't find some type of elevation change, I don't even want to bother with it because it's so frustrating trying to hunt flat ground.
Yeah. And that's what we have around here a lot is, there's a lot of, when you go out in the woods, it's a lot of flat ground, you know what I mean? So I'm curious, I've been diving off into those thermals a little bit. I'm curious how they'll work around here, you know what I mean? Because we don't have those big hills like that. So I'm really curious to get out and do some experimenting with that and see what happens. But I've heard you talk about it. I've heard Chris talk about it. I've heard other people talk about it. So it's really got my attention this year where I'm like, I'm just more interested in it than I've ever been. What gear are you running?
Yeah, so I started off kind of running the typical hang-ons at the time. When I got into the mobile hunting world, I really got into one sticking for a while. I did that for about 2 years straight, and didn't hate it, didn't love it. It was kind of the best at the time in terms of being able to go as far as I wanted to with as little weight as I wanted to, and as little gear as I could carry. And then I kind of just hit the point where I was like, man, I wish I had a little bit more room. And right about that time, Elevate came on the scene, and they released their Ultra Hang On, and it was right around 6 pounds with enough room for me to be able to kind of stand up and turn around if I wanted to. And I was like, man, I really like that. So I got that, ended up hunting with that for a season. Absolutely loved the setup. Got away from the 4 sticks to 2 sticks and 3-step aiders on each one, because I realized running that system I could usually get somewhere between 14 to 20 feet high if I needed to. And then when I realized that I could hang a tether and basically 1 stick even higher if I wanted to or needed to, that I could still do that and only have 2 sticks on me, I started doing that. And so now I've got the Elevate Ultra, 2 Ascend sticks from Elevate, and then 2 3-step altimeters that I run. And I ran strictly that last year, with the exception of my buck. I got the chance to try out Latitude's profile platform that day. I literally hunted out of it one time. I shot that buck, and I loved it. I just, again, for me, it wasn't worth sacrificing the extra room. I love the lightweight. I love the packability. But getting rid of the extra room that I had from a hybrid hang-on. And the other thing, too, the way that I hybrid hunt with a saddle out of a hang-on, if I had my hang-on with me that day, I wouldn't have had to take a weak side shot, and I would have shot that deer at 6 yards instead of 15 because of the way I would have been positioned, and everything would have just been more ideal for me versus being on a stationary platform where I can't really maneuver the way I want.
Yeah, I think this year I'm running. I've tried so many saddles. I'm still running the Buzzard Roost. I love that saddle to death. You know what I mean? I think it's, for me, my body type, it's like the most comfortable by far. Um, I have a bunch of platforms. I think I'm gonna run the Hunt Arsenal, the Razor. I got the Razor Mag and the 2.0. So I really like that 2.0 because I like a smaller platform just because I can get close. I'm tighter on the tree, I feel like. And I really, really like it. A buddy of mine, he got the mag before I got it, and he really likes it. So I was like, let me try it just in case. And so I haven't actually hunted on it. I've been on it a couple times, and I do like the room. So we'll see which way I go, but it's gonna probably be one of those Hunt Arsenal platforms for sure. But I've definitely been interested in checking out some of these hybrid setups they have out there. I don't know if I'll ever pull the trigger on one, but they really get me curious, where I'm checking them out. So I never know. Maybe one day I'll pull the trigger on one for sure, but we'll see what happens, man. What bow are you shooting?
Right now, none actually. I was
Oh,
using a PSE for a little bit. Hunted with it for 5 years. Loved it, with the exception of the overall length of it. And so, I had a buddy reach out to me at work who wanted to get into bow hunting this year, and asked me, if I had one available. And I told him, I said, you know what? I'll make you a deal on the one I used for the last 5 6 years. I'll sell it to you fully loaded. He bought it, and now I'm kind of in the market shopping. The two things I know is I want something around the 30-inch mark. If it can be a little bit shorter, it's more ideal. But my top two right now that I'm looking at are the Matthews Lift X and the PSE. I think it's the Mach 30. Just because of the size of it. I was in a couple of spots last year that were very pick your way through because they were so thick to try and get to where I wanted to be. And the PSE I had at the time, I measured it, but I think I measured it after the day I went to hunt that spot. And from the top of the bottom cam to the top of the top cam, it was 44 and a half inches. And I was like, this thing is a freaking broomstick. Like it didn't matter what was there; it was going to catch on it. It was going to
yeah,
snag, and I was so frustrated. So I really want to get back to that 30-inch axle to axle short bow and have the maneuverability of it again.
yeah. I've heard a lot of good things about that PSE Mach 30. My very first bow was the only PSE I've ever owned. It was actually a Buckmaster edition that they had come out with. Um, and I shot a few deer with that, and then I sold it to another buddy, and I upgraded or whatever. And it's funny because I've kept every bow that I've owned since then. I still have. And that's the one bow I'm always like, man, I wish I would have kept that one. That was my very first bow. That's what I started with. Was what I killed my first deer with. My first archery deer. And I'm like, why do I not have that? That was the dumbest thing I did was get rid of that bow. But I'm shooting this year. I'm a big bow tech guy. I uh, I love Bowtech. I do have a Matthews. I've got several Bowtechs. I do like an Obsession bow too. I really like it. That's the one I was telling Christopher Leopard about, and I said I got to build that bow. I picked the cams, the limbs, the riser color, all that stuff. I ride motorcycles, so I have a thing for black and orange because I ride a Harley. You know what I mean? That's just always been. I like black and orange, and so I built this bow. Basically, it's black and orange, and me being a Chiefs fan, my buddy calls me one day. He's also a Chiefs fan, but he's like, "Hey man, how you like that Burrow bow?" And I was like, Burrow bow? What are you talking about, man? And he goes, that Cincinnati Bengals bow you built over there. And I'm like, you sorry, dog. And so I've never been able to get that out of my head. Every time I look at it, I think Burrow bow. And I'm like, man, I about have to get rid of that sucker. You know what I'm saying? But I love it. I love the way it shoots. You know what I mean? I think it shoots a little bit better than Burrow throws. Don't tell Leopard I said that. You know what I mean? Hey, I thought I had him on here. Oh, I think it was last week. I thought I was gonna get him, man. I was like, 'cause we'll talk back and forth a little bit throughout the season, because he obviously is a Bengals fan, and so when it's time for them to play, we kind of give each other a little ration of crap, and so I thought, we got a song here that I thought everybody, anybody that knows anything about the Chiefs, they know the song by Tech Nine called Red Kingdom, and so. I downloaded into my little system here, and so as we're talking, I was like, "Hey, man, I got a message I was supposed to give to you," and I started playing that Red Kingdom song, and well, I'm a Chiefs fan. I know the song. He's a Bengals fan. He don't know the song, so it didn't quite go like I thought it would go, but it was still funny, and you know what I mean. So I like to give him some crap over that, but I'm definitely a Chiefs fan, not a Burrow fan. Now I feel like I got to build a red and yellow bow, so I have a Chiefs bow. You know what I'm saying? It's a good time, man. So are you a Bengals fan? I take it, being from Ohio.
Oh yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah.
I don't want to say I was born and raised. It was a little bit down the road, but I did become a big Bengals fan. And the one thing that I hate about the Chiefs is that their colors are red and yellow because I love the color combination of red and yellow. So every time I see it, I'm like, ugh.
Let's see, I'm that way. When I was young, I used to be like, oh, the Bengals got the best looking uniforms. You know what I mean? Even though I was a Chiefs fan, and I've always been a diehard Chiefs fan. Even 50 years of misery. You know what I'm saying? Watching them play, and we'd get to the playoffs, and you knew that first round we were going home. You know what I mean? So I've been enjoying the last few years of the success. You know what I'm saying? But when I was young, I loved the Bengals colors, the black and orange. So, but now I can't even build a bow no more because it's gonna be black and orange, and people are gonna give me crap about it. So. Hey man, we've been on here close to an hour. I know you're busy and stuff, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but this is definitely a beautiful buck you put down, man. Congratulations. Uh, I'm glad you got that closure with your uncle, man. I know that means a lot. And that, like I said, that's the thing about bow hunting and even the people you meet, man. I've met so many good, just kind people, sincere people. You know what I mean? Through the bow hunting world, and I'm sure there's a lot of different hunting organizations you can meet people and say the same thing, but these mobile hunters, they're a different breed. I feel like, you know what I'm saying. Everybody's just every time I run across somebody, I'm like, man, this is just a good dude, got a good soul, you know. Everybody I talk to on these podcasts, man, I always walk away going, man, that's a good dude. He's just like I said, a good soul, just a good person, man. So I'm very honored to have met you and talk with you and get to know you, man. You're a great guy, and I wish you nothing but the best and a lot of success this upcoming season. I look forward to meeting you in person at the Mobile Hunter Expo in Ohio there. Broadside Camo will be there for anybody listening that didn't know that. So again, Broadside Camo will be there. Anyway, so appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on to the show, brother. Enjoyed having you. Enjoyed talking to you. Glad you laughed at my joke. And didn't let me down there. That means a lot to me. But everybody watching, thank you very much, man, for watching. I hope we were a little bit entertaining. I hope we kept your attention, and I hope you enjoyed listening to Tyler talk about this buck he put down. And we'll just see y'all next time. Thanks for joining us, man. Thanks again, Tyler.